Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and toxic people and toxic situations. My hope has always been that this information will help you manage the relationships you're in and ideally avoid future ones. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. And you'll notice that a lot of our videos do take on issues related to healing. Please, if you're interested in doing that deeper dive on healing, I think YouTube's a great introduction to it. But if you really want to do that deeper dive and want information on our healing program, please go to the video notes and hit the link. So today I want to start, again, I love hearing from all of you. And if you could drop it in the chat, how many of you have heard that phrase, the phrase, nobody's perfect, from a person that you've been in a narcissistic relationship with? If you have heard this, please drop it in the chat, because I have a feeling we're going to get a lot of people endorsing this one. So let's unpack this issue. Okay, so nobody's perfect, right? Newsflash, nobody is perfect. So again, I want to hear from you. If any of you have ever heard this little phrase, nobody's perfect, from a narcissistic person in your life or from an enabler of a narcissist. My guess is that this is happening to all of us more often than not in many, if not most, of our narcissistic relationships. So I want to help you understand that so you're better prepared for when it happens. So let's file nobody's perfect under the enabling phrases that end up gaslighting survivors of narcissistic abuse and pull more and more second chances out of people who are stuck in narcissistic relationships. And you know what the challenge is with this statement, nobody's perfect? It's true. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nothing is perfect. Perfection is a nonsense word when it comes to understanding human beings and human relationships. So to say nobody's perfect is like saying the sun is hot or gravity makes things fall. Yeah, got it. Kind of like, okay, very, very basic, right? But this phrase is often thrown about when the narcissistic person screws up, and they always screw up. All of us screw up, right? We all screw up in many small ways during our day. We forget an appointment. We put red socks in with the whites. We put the wrong date on something that we're signing. We pay the bill late. We burn the toast. Nobody's perfect, right? The issue is that this idea of nobody's perfect is also often thrown around in narcissistic relationships as a way of excusing big ticket mistakes like infidelity or major lies or betrayals or abusive, cruel words or behaviors like, I slept with your best friend. Nobody's perfect. Or I sent a naked selfie to my assistant. Nobody's perfect. Or I lied about how much money I lost on that investment. Nobody's perfect. Okay, yeah, it was wrong to insult you and call you a bad mother. Nobody's perfect. Yeah, no. Sadly, the nobody's perfect defense really works very well because the phrase itself is true. But what it does is it deflects the focus off of the bad, entitled, unempathic, or deceitful behavior and moves it over to this universal truism that nobody's perfect. The problem is that most people in narcissistic relationships are quite empathic and more than willing to try to see both sides of a situation. So when they are hit with the nobody's perfect defense and couple that up with some trauma bonding, it works. It provides the narcissistic person with a quick justification. The fight moves away from the lie or the abuse or the deceit or the behavior, and it moves over to a discussion of nobody's perfect. It puts you in a catch-22 because right out the gate, you sort of lose the fight. If you say something like, well, that's not true, I'm perfect, well, that's not going to fly because you're not perfect either. If you try to fight that nobody's perfect premise, you are more likely to be met with contempt or mockery of them suggesting, oh, I get it. You think you're perfect. Then the whole conversation devolves into them painting you as a self-righteous believer in your own perfection. And it all gets really confusing really fast. It's a very, very tough argument to win. The bigger problem with the nobody's perfect of all of it is that other people get on the nobody's perfect bandwagon as well. Friends who are trying to give you advice, therapists, other folks you may turn to, other observers or enablers who are in your midst. And as a result, you hit the nobody's perfect justification all around after the narcissist does something bad, which can leave many survivors feeling or being portrayed as though they're being unreasonable for wanting to sort of unbraid this lie or understand it or understand the betrayal or expect some self-reflection or accountability by the narcissistic person for what they did, rather than the tired old nobody's perfect. Perfectionism is such an interesting issue in narcissism. In their grandiosity, they actually hold perfectionism as a possible goal. They strive for perfection. They unreasonably expect perfectionism. They have fantasy visions of what people and situations can look like or be like, and will berate other people, their family members, their employees, their partners, for not being perfect. That's why the nobody's perfect defense can really, really be so grating. When they finally do pull out a phrase to talk about their betrayal, it's not from a place of true vulnerability, but from a place of blame shifting. Big surprise, right? So what do you do with the nobody's perfect of it all in your narcissistic relationships? You have to see the behavior of the other person in a relationship of any kind, whether they're narcissistic or not, in a context. Is this behavior, this bad behavior, repeated, or is it a one-time transgression? After making the mistake, is the other person in that relationship making a genuine effort to change? Or do they keep making the mistake over, or doing the bad thing over and over again, and keep shrugging and saying, I don't know, nobody's perfect? How much of a violation was their behavior? Was it a breach of trust or abuse that caused harm to you and others around you? Think about these things when you really take in that behavior. And always remember the power of the word "and" in the narcissistic relationship. It can be such a useful tool to push back on cognitive dissonance, the cognitive dissonance that's raised by moments like when somebody says, nobody's perfect. So things like, yeah, you're right, nobody's perfect, and you lied to me. Or, yeah, I got it, nobody's perfect, and you betrayed my trust. Or, nobody's perfect, and that was abusive. Got to have that and. You can still have the nobody's perfect. Hook it into the behavior. You can preserve the universal truth of nobody's being perfect, again, and stay focused on the behavior, because that's the issue. Not that there's much point. The gaslighting, the denial, the justification, and the blame shifting, that's going to be the most likely scenario in any conversation with a narcissistic person, always. And maybe that's the one thing that's perfect. It lands the same way every time. I hope that's helpful, and thanks again.